I absolutely love the look of etched glass, but when I sit around thinking about what actually goes into making it, that's going to be a hard no. I purchased this stuff online with the DIY idea in mind, and when it got to me and I read these dangers, I was like, ooh, we're gonna have to pass on that. I've personally purchased frosted spray paint to try and recreate DIYs like this, and I thought, let's try and create a Mod Podge hack that saves us even using spray paint. I grabbed me a Dollar Tree piece that I just had in my stash and some vinyl. I wanted to just cut out a little design and then put it over the glass piece. There are several different ways you could go about this. I chose the easiest shape next to a circle, which was a heart. And I mean, the time of the year, so they're easy to find. And if you have cutting machines and you want to cut you a shape and then DIY this, go right ahead. I wanted to make this accessible to anyone that wanted to just trace anything and cut a piece that don't have access to those machines. And you'll see here, I am plopping these hearts in different sections and using different sizes. I ended up only trimming out 3 pieces. 1, I got lazy, and 2, I thought to myself, you know what? Place them where you want and then cut out what design works. You don't have to use everything down as your final piece. And then trim down around your design as close as you can. I grabbed a multi-surface paint because I know it sticks to glass and we just need a tiny smoosh of it. And then I grabbed some matte Mod Podge and used about a teaspoon of that and then mixed everything together. I set that off to the side and then took our stencil that we made and started putting it on the glass. When you have that on your glass, grab you a paintbrush and do thin little streaks over your stencil where the design is, and then let it dry. Okay, I'm gonna share with you the mistake that I made so you can recreate this at home properly. I am probably gonna definitely tackle this again because I know where I mucked up at. Plus, I like using Mod Podge all the time, so why not? If you have never seen the swirl method before, then you would not know that glossy Mod Podge on its own is going to give you a really cool stained glass, frosted glass appearance, depending on how you apply it. So I already knew just adding a little smoosh of white paint was going to just enhance that frosted effect. You'll see here as I'm drying it, that you can see some streaks, right? And then I'm like, oh, we got to add another layer of this mix here because we got to even that out, right? Wrong. Don't do it. You can see here that the translucency of the frosted appearance is disappearing with the thicker we create the layers because we added the paint. However, I can never leave well enough alone. And my initial idea, once we had the translucency on here, was to share with you that you can create additional enhancements in your piece by taking a dotting tool and carving out gently extra designs inside of your faux stained glass. So while I put 2 coats on too many because I was worried about the streaks, what I realized, so you at home don't make the same mistake, is just use a fatter brush, go over the design one time, let that sucker dry, you'll see the translucency, and it should turn out beautifully. But I still really like how mine turned out. If you're always using tea bags or coffee to create a vintage style look to some book pages and hate waiting for things to dry, then I have a hack for you. Really, you can use this hack in many different ways, not just because you like to, you know, use tea bags or coffee. Tear up some book pages. This is just a book from Dollar Tree. And if you honestly don't want to tear up some book pages, leave them whole. This will work either way. Grab some matte Mod Podge, and you're not going to need a lot, like a tablespoon, and a little bit of Waverly's Antique Wax. You could probably use some brown acrylic paint as well. I just happen to always have this stuff on hand. Using about a teaspoon to the tablespoon ratio, and then we're just gonna smoosh it all together until it looks like liquid poo or dirty sink water. Pick one. Listen, just mix it together until it's brown. Okay, grab your book page, your dictionary page, whatever you have torn and you want to DIY with. And this, again, I should say, is really going to work with just whatever you want to kind of stick your pages onto, like if you're decoupaging something. Otherwise you're just going to make hard crusty pages, and I don't know that this is going to work for that aspect of it. But anyway, if we're going to decoupage onto something, this hack has you. You take your mixture and then just start smacking it on down whatever you're applying your little dictionary page or your little book page to. And you don't really have to be so mindful with your application with this, because we're creating a vintage type look. I kind of go in a little heavy, so this way it sops up the paper just a smidge, and I will go right around the edges as well. Since dictionary pages can be a little bit thinner, do be mindful of that. Okay, you want to be mindful of that. Once I'm happy with the coverage, take a little bit of water, do a little squirt on the top, not oversaturating anything, but just so I can move around our antique wax with a paper towel. And this is a dry paper towel, just so you know. You can actually then take the paper and it's going to pull a little bit, creating some wrinkles. You can do this as much as you want and just be careful, but if you have a glob of paper towels like I do here, it moves really gingerly, and you can be purposeful with your wrinkles. Let your piece dry up, and then you can go over it with another layer of whatever Mod Podge you want. I would recommend matte, especially if you're going for a vintage look. This turned out so beautiful, and that antique wax is on there. Okay, it's not coming off. That's the beauty of mixing it in with the Mod Podge. Of course, you can take some more antique wax and go over around the edges to just deepen that brown. I just left mine as is, and I'm taking some Dollar Tree stickers and plopping them on here just to give you guys an idea. Obviously, put whatever you want on your piece. I think this is such a cool and easy way to create vintage looks using some Mod Podge with just a little bit of antique wax. This hack is going to help you use the fabric Mod Podge and avoid the glossy end result that so many of you complain about in my comments. They do not like seeing this gloss over their napkins. Well, I hope you're ready for the work that is going to require you to be able to accomplish this look. For our demonstration purposes, we're going to be using a little oven mitt and a pot holder from Dollar Tree. Use whatever you want, obviously. We're going to also need to break into my napkin stash. I wanted just a single solitary design to show you guys two different ways of doing things, as well as why I do one over the other. You would think that this is an easy decision, but it's definitely not, especially when you like the decoupage things as much as I do, and you have the stash that I have. This isn't even half of it, honestly. Let's play a little game, people. Are you ready for this? I thought it would be fun if you were faced with the same three decisions that I was. My favorites were this rooster, the truck, and this flower piece. Pause your TV or your phone and write in the comments which one you think I picked. Did you guess right? I can't wait to see these comments. I picked the truck. So I want to give you guys two options, and there are two different ways that you can trim napkins. One is to tear it up around the design, and the other one is to cut it out specifically. When you're working with fabric or glass, a good rule of thumb is to keep in mind, if you plan on blending that piece, if you plan on blending the piece, tearing it like this is going to be your best option. Those frayed edges around the end are going to allow for any paints to come in and smooth that out and make it look absolutely flawless. However, if you're going to be putting this, especially on a piece that has a pattern or a different design on the back, that's not going to blend very well. You'll see the end result here, that cutting the napkin is going to give you the most flawless look when you're working with fabric, with a pattern, and the fabric Mod Podge. However, there's a trick to it. Napkins are super thin, and it is a rule of thumb to get all the sneaky layers off the back, so this way that top decorative layer smooshes right on down to your project seamlessly. However, with napkins, it is not always easy to put them on a surface that has a pattern because you can see through it. So to avoid that, you can take a piece of parchment paper. You can use cling wrap as well. I like the parchment paper because it's non-sticky and I don't have to worry about my napkins sticking to the parchment paper. You're going to want to flip them upside down once you have them completely cut out. I wouldn't recommend doing this before you cut them out. You're going to apply them onto the parchment paper, and you'll see that they're moving here. I don't recommend taping them down. Just, you know, use your fingers to kind of keep placing them. Put a thin layer of that fabric Mod Podge over top the napkin. Be very ginger with this, and not all napkins are created equal, so some are going to be too thin for you to even do this. I would test your napkin beforehand. But putting this layer of fabric Mod Podge on here is going to allow for our design to pop through and our paint to stick to it before we put it over the design on our pot holder and our little mitt that we have. Make sure if you go to do this, you use a fabric friendly paint. I'm just using this because it's what I have on hand and sharing the DIY hack with you. Once that fabric Mod Podge is completely dry, you're going to take a very dry brushing of some white paint right over top of your fabric Mod Podge. And it does not have to be a solid coverage. You will see here that just a little bit is going to help that design just to pop through. It doesn't need to be a lot. Remember, I said in the beginning, you're going to have to be prepared to do what it takes to make this happen. It's going to be important to use a fabric safe paint. So this way, as you're applying it onto your fabric piece, everything's going to bend properly. Using paints that aren't made for fabric, it's going to make it crusty and could possibly break your napkin down the line. When that's dry, it's time to bring in the parchment paper, okay? For real, you're going to need the parchment paper. Don't wing it this time. Like normally you'll see me wing the iron-on method without the parchment paper. Don't never do that. Not with no fabric project, okay? You for real need to cut you a little section of parchment paper that's going to cover over whatever you're ironing onto your fabric. Here's how you avoid the glossiness. You're going to take another layer of your fabric Mod Podge that you're hopefully now applying over your fabric paint and your first layer of fabric Mod Podge and put just on the back of the design. At this point, you're on your third layer and the napkin is a little bit tougher, so you can apply a decent amount of the fabric Mod Podge on the back here. Let it dry for a little bit, and then you can place it right on the piece of fabric that you want to iron it onto. I get asked all the time about the heat temperature on the iron that I use. People, I use this mini Cricut iron because usually it's sitting at my craft table, not because it has to be something specific, my friends. Use whatever works for you, okay? And I would Google whatever you're trying to iron and seeing what they recommend. I just go according to whatever the hottest temperature is on this and use whatever iron works for you. It doesn't have to be this. I get asked these questions all the time. Use whatever iron works for you, my friends. I'm just lazy and have this sitting near me and I put it on the hottest temperature that it has. I'm just being real with you here, people. Sometimes I wing stuff and mostly just use whatever's sitting around my craft table, okay? I don't always have a rhyme or reason behind it. So this design is the one I trimmed perfectly, and as you can see, it pops amazingly out with that plaid behind it. This one is the one that I said most of the time I tear things when I'm going to use paint to blend it in, and you'll see that this one does not pop out or even look purposefully on here. It looks kind of out of place. However, there is no glossiness over these end designs. They are matte, they are beautiful, and to touch them, they feel like material. However, I don't recommend washing them, okay? I would only use these for decorative purposes. If you want to be able to wash it, unfortunately, you're going to have to put that fabric Mod Podge over the top of it. If you love the look of canvases, but you can't paint, don't worry, this Mod Podge hack has your back. You're going to need a beautiful napkin and some glossy Mod Podge. I personally, for this type of hack, love to find the napkins that have the ridges in them. It makes it look all that more authentic. You can obviously use whatever kind of napkin you want, and the larger the canvas, the more napkins you would need to use or break up to actually fit your piece. So keep that in mind. This is a large canvas from Dollar Tree, and we're going to just use some matte Mod Podge to actually iron it on. I don't want to waste any of my glossy that we need because I'm actually down to the last little bit, not for any special reason. If I had more, I would have just used glossy, but let's be real here. I'm cheap and I had extra in the matte, so that's what I'm going to use for the iron on. Put a nice healthy amount on here and let that sucker dry. It's time to bring in the iron and the parchment paper, people, and the parchment paper, okay? You're gonna see me wing this sucker and not use the parchment paper on this, but I recommend using it if, you know, you've never ironed on or decoupage before. Don't start me leading you down the road to winging things. If you've never ironed on a canvas, keep in mind there's no bracing in the center, so you're going to want to make sure that you're being very ginger going over it. And once you have the ends all ironed on, flip that sucker over and then iron the center upside down. It's just going to give you a really flawless connection. Use whatever technique you want to get your extra napkin off around your canvas. I'm just taking a finger sander here and going around and getting mine off. Then you're going to bring in your glossy Mod Podge. And yes, it has to be glossy. All you glossy haters just make me want to flick you in your face. I'm just kidding. I don't promote violence here. I love everyone. Now you're going to take a nice thick layer of that glossy Mod Podge, put it over your canvas, let it dry, and how stunning this faux painted canvas looks. I love it. I'm using a 1x6 I had in my scrap pile for this Mod Podge hack base. I'm going to take some black chalk paint to create our first layer. I'm just spraying the wood here so this way the chalk paint spreads quicker and I use less of it. This is probably my most requested Mod Podge hack. I am always asked about creating a crackle effect with Mod Podge. I don't do it often and mostly because it's not my favorite way. But creating a crackle effect with Mod Podge is a different way that you can use it. So I wanted to go over this hack and share it with you. And I figure if we're going to do it, let's get artsy fartsy with it. I'm taking a little section from my TDS Decoupage Paper called Spring and Easter Blessings. This is such a beautiful piece. If you're interested, you can find my decoupage paper line at thediystruggle.com. I want to match this teal color with the majority of the project. However, I want the design to really pop, so I'm taking some white paint and putting in the backgrounds. And I'm using DIY's paint for this. You can use whatever white paint you want. I get this from Sammy over at Unicorn Dust Designs, and I keep her link down in the description in case you're interested. I allowed this paint to dry and then came in with a matte Mod Podge. I've used glossy for this as well and pretty much get the same results. You're going to want to have a pretty healthy layer, and it doesn't really matter how you apply. As you can see here, I'm kind of going different ways, and I'm going around the sections of the wood that I want this to be on, which is just going to be at the top and the bottom. But first we're doing the top section, and I'm doing this section really heavy. I did not have an exact match to the napkin that had the teal on it. So I'm mixing some different colors until I get a color that I'm happy with. You don't want to let the Mod Podge dry completely, okay? Let it dry mostly and then bring in your paints. I do not drag my paintbrush down this because I don't want to move the Mod Podge. So as you see, I'm tapping all along it and just going straight down the Mod Podge. And I want to tell you here that there are a bunch of ways I'm sure that people do this differently. If you have information, please put it down in the comments. Put positive feedback. Everyone is here to learn. No one has to be mean in the comments when you are offering help or insight to educate others and help them along their DIY journey. Thank you. I grabbed my heat gun, did not let this completely dry, and just started going over it. The top section, I had a healthy thick layer of paint and a healthy thick layer of the Mod Podge, and you will notice almost immediately we have some separation and some crackling. And I know you're probably thinking, Brady, you said but this wasn't your favorite way. It's just not. I like using my mediums. I don't mind the Mod Podge itself, but it just doesn't give me the overall effect that I like. You use whatever works best for you. I like to give people options. It doesn't have to be the exact thing that I love. Do whatever works for you. It's your art, it's your crafting, it's your projects. On the bottom here, I use a thin layer of Mod Podge and a thin layer of paint to show you that it also gives a different effect. If you use a lighter layer of paint, you will get the even deeper effect of that separation. I let that completely dry before carrying on with finishing the entire rest of the project. If you want more information on decoupage, I have a playlist linked down in the description box below and tons of tips and tricks to help you with all of those things. I think this piece turned out absolutely beautiful. Let me know in the comments below if you have used this hack with Mod Podge to create a crackle effect. And let me know in the comments below if you've had an opportunity to craft with TDS Decoupage Paper. As always, thank you all so much for hanging out with me, and until next time, bye!